Well, hello, CFCBers, and I'm having to fill in one of the missing sermons in the series. We couldn't post it online. When I went back to check the recording, it recorded, but I had accidentally muted the mics on it, and so we didn't have any sound, so I wasn't able to post that. So I've had some requests for what was shared from Daniel 2. And so that's what I'm wanting to do here. It definitely won't be the same environment, the same feel with it, but we will at least give you the basic rundown of what was shared from Daniel 2. So I'll begin reading from verses 1 to 12 here in just a few minutes. We'll read through the chapter and make commentary as we go along. But Daniel chapter 2 is basically the key to all Gentile history when it comes to the Bible. And through it, we understand the passage of time. This is probably one of the most attacked passages in all Scripture. We've shared that Daniel has had its foes from its beginning, and this is one of the chapters that is brought up against it because of its accuracy. People who do not agree with Daniel being written about 600 years before Christ say that it would have to be written after these events that Daniel 2 is going to talk about, because nobody would be able to liken them with such accuracy. And so they put Daniel anywhere between 250 to 100 AD being written, mostly 2nd century BC. So it's an interesting thing to look at. But here is an outline of all Gentile human history. And so this does take place, and it's written about 600 years before Christ. And so that makes the prophecy even more amazing to us, coming through from a faith perspective, that God was able to give us to Daniel, and with such accuracy. And it demonstrates that God is in control. So let's begin reading Daniel 2, verses 1 through 12. It says, "And in the 2nd year of the reign of Nebuchadnezzar dreamed dreams, wherewith his spirit was troubled, and his sleep brake from him. Then the king commanded to call the magicians, and the astrologers, and the sorcerers, and the Chaldeans, for to show the king his dreams. So they came and stood before the king, and the king said unto them, I have dreamed a dream, and my spirit was troubled to know the dream. Then spake the Chaldeans to the king in Syriac, O king, live forever. Tell thy servants the dream, and we will show the interpretation. The king answered and said to the Chaldeans, The thing is gone from me. If ye will not make known unto me the dream with the interpretation thereof, ye shall be cut in pieces, and your houses shall be made a dunghill. But if ye show the dream and the interpretation thereof, ye shall receive of me gifts and rewards and great honor. Therefore show me the dream and the interpretation thereof. They answered again and said, Let the king tell his servants the dream, and we will show the interpretation of it. The king answered and said, I know of certainty that ye would gain the time, because ye see the thing is gone from me. But if ye will not make known unto me the dream, there is but one decree for you. For ye have prepared lying and corrupt words to speak before me, till the time be changed. Therefore tell me the dream, and I shall know that ye can show me the interpretation thereof. The Chaldeans answered before the king and said, There is not a man upon the earth that can show the king's matter. Therefore there is no king, lord, nor ruler that asks such things at any magician, or astrologer, or Chaldean. And it is a rare thing that the king requireth, and there is none other than that can show it before the king, except the gods, whose dwelling is not with flesh. For this cause the king was angry and very furious, and commanded to destroy all the wise men of Babylon." And so what we begin to see here is that Nebuchadnezzar dreamed a dream, and it had troubled him for some time. And so finally being basically fed up with the sleepless nights, he asked his wise men and astrologers, his scientists of sorts, to come and tell him the dream. However, he knew that these wise men could tell lies, and that they would tell him anything, and that their conjuring of sorts would be made into anything. So he claims to have forgot the dream. So did he forget it, or did he test his advisors? We don't really know. However, he does recognize the dream when Daniel will later on give the dream itself. But as we would read, it would seem if the king had forgotten and the wise men thought so, they would have conjured some story, because if he truly forgot it, then they could have made up anything and seen if it would have went with that. So it seems to be a type of testing, because he knew the hearts of his wise men, that they would lie. And so the only way he could get a for sure interpretation is that if these men also had the power to figure out what the dream was. Of course, they replied that never had there been a request made of any of the astrologers, because it's impossible. Only the Babylonian gods in their mind could do this. And if you read there again, in verse 11, they dwell not with flesh. So their gods are distant. Their gods don't mess with these types of things. The gods could divine what the dream was and reveal it to them if they cared. And so this is an impossible request made. Let's go on and read from verses 13 to 18. This is a longer chapter, so we'll read quite a bit. And the decree went forth that the wise men should be slain, and they sought Daniel and his fellows to be slain. Then Daniel answered with counsel and with wisdom to Arioch, the captain of the king's guard, which was gone forth to slay the wise men of Babylon. He answered and said to Arioch, the king's captain, why is the decree so hasty from the king? Then Arioch made the thing known to Daniel. Then Daniel went in and desired of the king that he would give him time, and that he would show the king the interpretation. Then Daniel went to his house and made the thing known to Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, his companions, that they would desire mercies of the God of heaven concerning this secret, that Daniel and his fellows should not perish with the rest of the wise men of Babylon. And so Daniel and the three Hebrew boys were not with this group, even though they were a part of this group now because of what we learn in chapter 1. They were not here, and so they were caught up in the midst of this and were being ushered to their death. Daniel says, wait, hold on a minute, why is this even happening? And Arioch tells him what was going on, and Daniel says, let me talk to him. And Daniel conversed with the king, and the king said, yes, I'll give you time. I'll let you do this. And so there's something about Daniel's calm assurance that impressed the king. And it's really a testimony to you and to me that the peace of God can rule at our hearts, even when there is a sword to our neck. And that is the confidence that we have in God and the Spirit of God that He gives us. We have not been given a spirit of fear, but we have been given a spirit of adoption whereby we cry, Abba, Father. But Daniel also wasted no time in going back to his companions, his friends, the three Hebrew boys. We see their Hebrew name here, and to go into prayer. And so we are called to be in prayer and not in panic. When situations are very tough, when trials come along the way, the peace of God should rule in our heart, and instead of panic, we go to God in prayer. and bring our needs and our petitions before Him. Continue reading. Moving kind of fast through this part of the story, and we'll slow down once we get to the dream itself. But let's read from verses 19 to 36. Then was the secret revealed unto Daniel in a night vision. Then Daniel blessed the God of heaven. Daniel answered and said, Blessed be the name of God forever and ever, for wisdom and might are His, and He changeth the times and the seasons. He removeth kings and setteth up kings. He giveth wisdom unto the wise, and knowledge to them that know understanding. He revealeth the deep and secret things. He knoweth what is in the darkness, and the light dwelleth with Him. I thank Thee and praise Thee, O God of my fathers, who hast given me wisdom and might, and hast made known unto me now what we desired of Thee. For Thou hast now made known unto us the king's matter. Therefore Daniel went in unto Arioch, whom the king had ordained to destroy the wise men of Babylon. He went and said thus unto him, Destroy not the wise men of Babylon. Bring me in before the king, and I will show unto the king the interpretation. Then Arioch brought in Daniel before the king in haste, and said thus unto him, I have found a man of the captives of Judah, that will make known unto the king the interpretation. The king answered and said to Daniel, whose name was Belteshazzar, Art thou able to make known unto me the dream which I have seen, and the interpretation thereof? Daniel answered in the presence of the king, and said, The secret which the king hath demanded, cannot the wise men and the astrologers, the magicians, the soothsayers show unto the king? But there is a God in heaven, that revealeth secrets, and maketh known to the king Nebuchadnezzar what shall be in the latter days. Thy dream and the visions of thy head upon thy bed are these. As for thee, O king, thy thoughts came into thy mind upon thy bed, what should come to pass hereafter. And he that revealeth secrets maketh known to thee what shall come to pass. But as for me, this secret is not revealed to me for any wisdom that I have more than any living, but for their sakes that shall make known the interpretation to the king, and that thou mightest know the thoughts of thy heart. Thou, O king, sawest and behold a great image. This great image, whose brightness was excellent, stood before thee, and the form thereof was terrible. This image's head was of fine gold, his breast and his arms of silver, his belly and thighs of brass, his legs of iron, his feet of iron, and part of clay. Thou sawest till that a stone was cut out without hands, which smote the image upon his feet, that were of iron and clay, and brake them to pieces. Then was the iron, the clay, the brass, the silver, and the gold broken to pieces together, and became like the chaff of the summer threshing floors. And the wind carried them away, that no place was found for them. And the stone that smote the image became a great mountain, and filled the whole earth. And so Daniel begins by defending the wise men in one way, saying to the king, we have the interpretation and the dream, so don't kill them. But in another way, he shows the weakness of humanity by also taking the time to glorify his God. And so he talks about how they were not able to divine the dream and the interpretation. And even Daniel himself is humbled during this, in that he says that it's not even by his own wisdom, that if it was left up to him on his own or his companions, they also could not do this task. And so the only one that should receive the glory, and the only cause for knowing the dream, is Daniel's Lord. And so he gives praise to the one who reveals secrets, the God above all other gods. Now this dream is a dream of a great statue, which, if you've read ahead, then you will get an idea of why maybe Nebuchadnezzar in the next chapter built a giant statue of himself as we go through this. So this great image is a large statue of a human. The wording here for image that was used was not typical of idols that were made to like gods or in the form of a beast, but rather this is talking about truly a human image. And so there is apparent symbolism in the major metals and the form of the image. As what one author says, only the first part, the head, constitutes in itself a united whole. The silver is divided into the arms and breast. The brass apparently extends from the abdomen unto the upper legs or thighs. The legs, of course, also constitute a division which ends in the toes of the feet with further subdivision. Instead of being, what is the question? Instead of man beginning in the dust and consummating in fine gold, God reveals man in the times of the Gentiles to begin with fine gold, and in the end, dust. And so we see the decay of humanity coming up here. As I again said, this is an outline. Now, what is the full interpretation of this? Well, let's keep on reading, and we will just go ahead and read to the end of the chapter. This is the dream, and we will tell the interpretation thereof before the king. Thou, O king, art a king of kings, for the God of heaven hath given thee a kingdom, power, and strength, and glory. And wheresoever the children of men dwell, the beasts of the field and the fowls of the heaven hath he given into thine hand, and hath made thee ruler over them all. Thou art this head of gold. And after thee shall rise another kingdom inferior to thee, and another kingdom of brass, which shall bear rule over all the earth. And the fourth kingdom shall be strong as iron, for as much as iron breaketh in pieces and subdueth all things, and as iron that breaketh all these shall it break in pieces and bruise. And whereas thou sawest the feet and toes, part of the potter's clay, and part of iron, the kingdom shall be divided, but there shall be in it of the strength of the iron, for as much as thou sawest the iron mixed with the miry clay, and as the toes of the feet were part of iron and part of clay, so the kingdom shall be partly strong and partly broken. And whereas thou sawest iron mixed with miry clay, they shall mingle themselves with the seed of men, but they shall not cleave one to another, even as iron is not mixed with clay. And in the days of these kings shall the God of heaven set up a kingdom, which shall never be destroyed, and the kingdom shall not be left to other people, but it shall break in pieces and consume all these kingdoms, and it shall stand forever. For as much as thou sawest that the stone was cut out of the mountain without hands, and that it brake in pieces the iron, the brass, the clay, the silver, and the gold, the great God hath made known to the king what shall come to pass hereafter. And the dream is certain, and the interpretation thereof sure. The king Nebuchadnezzar fell upon his face and worshipped Daniel, and commanded that they should offer an oblation and sweet odors unto him. The king answered unto Daniel and said, Of a truth it is, that your God is a God of gods, and a Lord of kings, and a revealer of secrets, seeing thou couldst reveal this secret. Then the king made Daniel a great man, and gave him many great gifts, and made him ruler over the whole province of Babylon, and chief of the governors over all the wise men of Babylon. Then Daniel requested of the king, and he set Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego over the affairs of the province of Babylon. But Daniel sat in the gate of the king. And so, let's start with it. Daniel interpreted the dream, and Nebuchadnezzar was in awe of it. He praised Daniel and his God, and ended up placing these four over the kingdom, and set them up in higher positions of authority among Nebuchadnezzar's wise men, which is probably why there was so much trouble for these boys later on, because of jealousy of their favor that they've been given. But going back to the interpretation of the dream and the outline of human history, of Gentile human history, one writer says probably the best solution to the problem is the familiar teaching that Daniel's prophecy actually passes over the present age, the period between the first and second coming of Christ, or specifically the period between Pentecost and the rapture of the church. There is nothing unusual about such a solution, as Old Testament prophecies often lump together predictions concerning the first and second coming of Christ, without regard for the millennia that lay between. And so we see that this is a thing, a time that stretches from Daniel's period all the way to even our time, to the setting up of Christ's kingdom. So what is the way that this is going? First off, we start with the golden head in verses 37 and 38, and this is symbolic of Nebuchadnezzar's kingdom. And this is the greatest kingdom, as Daniel says, kingdom of gold. And it is truly a magnificent kingdom in regards to power, influence, in beauty of what all that it had. However, coming after this is that there would be another kingdom that is symbolized by the silver, and it says that it is inferior. Now, of course, just like the chest and arms area is larger than the head, we know that the kingdom that came past this was larger, but not as great in its brilliance and its beauty, and that's the kingdom of the Medes and the Persian. One of the interesting things is that these metals also correlate with some of the things of these kingdoms. So gold was a major currency considered in Babylon, and silver was the primary currency for the Medes Persians. So they come in. And then another kingdom after them, that would be the brass stomach and thighs. And this is a Greek Macedonian kingdom that we see in verse 39. And that this kingdom, it says in verse 39, said, shall bear rule over all the earth. Well, Alexander the Great conquered the known world, basically, at that time. And so we see that prophesied in the scriptures here. And then we go to the legs of iron and the feet of iron and clay mix down all to the toes. So this is symbolic of the Roman Empire. Of course, the iron is that they are able to go out and basically take over all of the earth through brute force. And of course, we know that Alexander began this as they take over his area, and that division was coming in that. But when we begin to look at it, so we start with the belly of brass going down to the thighs. So there's division. So as the kingdom came in, there began to be division in the Greek kingdom. And so you might say, well, is this other kingdoms? No, because it couldn't be, because Alexander, after he died, his kingdom went basically to 4 of his generals. So we don't have 4 legs, we have 2 legs. So there was a division, so we got to look for another way. And this really becomes predominant the farther you go down the statue, the division of the legs. And so we understand in Rome that there was truly a division in Rome, not politically, but geographically, of the east and the west. Primarily the west, or the east and, or I'm sorry, the west and the Middle East area, Jerusalem and all that, basically divided by water and large geography. So that's probably where we're beginning to see this division, but yet they're the same metal in that they're iron. And where it says that this iron will break apart itself and go forth and conquer, is that with Rome building roads and being able to send their armies all throughout the world, was able to disperse quite rapidly and efficiently, and display their physical strength. But the real question is, when it comes down to the feet and you begin to have iron mixing with clay, we know that Rome, around the 6th and 7th century, or the 5th to 7th century begin to break down. And you begin to wonder where that comes from. We would possibly say, and here's how I'm seeing it, is that the feet and clay mix represents a revived Roman Empire, and this is what we will see in the end times. So again, what would these represent? One writer, H.A. Ironside, for instance, defines it as speaking of an attempted union between imperialism and democracy. Gaebelein has a similar interpretation. He says, but what does this clay represent? Clay is of the earth. It stands for that which does not belong to the great statue at all, a foreign ingredient brought in. The metals represent monarchies, but the clay stands for democratic rule, the rule by the people. And so, with that, we are beginning to get an understanding of this being monarchies, being a revived Roman Empire. And right now, we are in the middle of great political unrest even in our day. But here's the big reason why we see the feet as being modern day revived Roman Empire, at least similitudes to it. And you don't have to go very far to see that Greek Hellenism, which was the culture or the enculturating of the Greek culture, influenced Rome and has many, many major inroads to where we are at today. So it's not very far-stretched to see similar uprisings, resurrections of this old Roman Empire. When the rock that was hewn out of the mountain without human hands comes into the picture, it comes, and we know the old song, tearing down the kingdoms of this world. That's the phrase in it. The rock doesn't hit the statue in the head or anywhere else. It hits it square in the feet. If you go back to verse 34, thou sawest till a stone was cut out with the hands, which smote the image upon his feet, that were of iron and clay. Now, if this is purely just the Roman Empire, when Jesus came, it would have taken another 600 years for the Roman Empire to fall. Now, we know that Christ's kingdom came with him when he walked with us. And when he was crucified, the kingdom of God is now at hand. However, in the tension that we talk about of something being already but yet not yet, we see the kingdom starting. It's already a reality in our hearts, but not in the world around us. And so that's the not yet part. And so there is still coming a full consummation or realization of the kingdom of God on earth. And so when we begin to think of this, it makes sense. In verse 28, when Daniel is talking about the dream, he tells Nebuchadnezzar that you have seen things that are going to come in the latter days. And this is used 14 times in the Old Testament and always refers to the Messianic kingdom, with reference of being history now, but not having a final culmination until the end of time. So this is not culminated fully in Daniel's time or in any of these kingdoms' times. This is at the end of human time, not just Gentile time. So, when Christ comes, he will come and rock the world, take down all these human-made kingdoms, and set up his own earthly kingdom that we see a very good, clear picture of what it will look like in Revelation. So very, very key inroad that we need to make there. So you can go read that. So what does this mean, though, as we take this chapter and this vision of this coming kingdom? First off, taken as a whole, it assures the ultimate rule of God over the earth to be fulfilled, not only in the millennial kingdom, but in the continued display of the sovereignty of God in the new heaven and the new earth. God is sovereign. No empire will last, and history is controlled by God. We read in verse 44 that this kingdom is eternal. There is no ending to it. This kingdom is not going to be like other kingdoms that rise and fall. Once it is set, it is permanent. We also read that it is unchanging. It will not be left to other people. Jesus Christ, the king of this kingdom, will not be succeeded. He will not step down. He will be the eternal ruler of this kingdom. We also read that it will consume all other kingdoms. It will smash them to pieces, and that they will be blown into the wind and never seen again. And then finally, we see in verse 45 that this kingdom is not made with human hands. There is going to be no political upheaval that says we brought this peace, we brought this rule of government. No religion is going to be able to do that. I know, such as in Roman Catholicism, they believe that the church is already the kingdom of God. And as I said, it's already in our hearts, but they believe themselves to be bringers of this one government at the end of time, this culmination of this peace on earth. And no, because when this kingdom is brought in, there's going to be no one's hands touching it and how it is set up, except for God. And so that is what we see. All things point toward the peace of God and the rule of God at the end of time. I hope this helps, and I do apologize for missing the actual sermon when we preached this. There was some more things that we was able to give into that as we were preaching, but I hope this suffices in getting you through the story as we have been preaching through it. Have a great time. Have a great day, and God bless.